Evil Pixel.
Followers of the channel are probably already aware of how we feel about Sunsoft. Sunsoft is responsible for some of the best games in the 8-bit era. Now this includes Batman for the NES, Journey to Silius, a few ports of the Final Fantasy series, and even onto the 32-bit era of gaming. So for such a big company at the time, there's bound to be a few projects that made their way to the cutting room floor unnoticed. And such is the case for the game we'll be talking about today, titled Sunman. And I guess the first thing I should explain is how this game was discovered. Well, it was discovered by the owner of the website Lost Levels. LostLevels.com was created in 2003 by video game historian Frank Cifaldi and his friends, who all shared the same love for canceled and unreleased video games. It's actually a very cool and helpful site with a decent archive of unreleased games. Now, the owner of Lost Levels stumbled upon an auction of prototype games from a European seller. Not knowing exactly what prototypes were in the lot, they took a chance, offered a bid, and eventually won the lot. Now, what they received in their lot find was a game featuring a character no one ever seen before, a game titled Sunman. Now, nothing is really known of the character Sunman himself, as it was just a sporadic character that Sunsoft seemed to choose. There are no comics, shows, or past references of him at all. So who exactly is Sunman? The story behind Sunman is a rather interesting one, and it can't be explained without mentioning Superman. A few individuals noticed something quite familiar. Well, as it turns out, this game is an exact carbon copy of an unreleased Superman NES game that we briefly discussed in this channel a few weeks ago. This Superman game was to be released by Sunsoft around 1992 and got very close to completion, but sadly never made it through its final phase and got canned altogether for the NES, as a similar Superman game was released on the Sega Genesis. If anyone is interested in the full story, you can click on the tab above, or I'll just leave a link in the description below. So the rumor was that Sunsoft never actually obtained the Superman DC rights prior to the development of this unreleased Superman game for the NES. And so because the game was being developed towards the end of the NES's life, Superman's rights were not able to be obtained for the project, as it wasn't approved. So Sunsoft didn't want to scrap the entire game due to it being almost complete, so they decided to make up their own hero and create a new IP. However, for whatever reason, they ultimately decided to cancel the game's release altogether, possibly because there was absolutely no coverage of their game, or their character Sunman. So people probably wouldn't be too keen to spend money on the game, and will ultimately fall into obscurity. Now, as far as why the speculations came about that this was a Superman game, was the level design. The level design was an exact replica of this unreleased Superman game. The only thing that was changed was the Superman sprite to Sunman. Another vivid clue was that this Sunman game had remnants of Superman in it. One example is the pause menu logo, which uses the exact same Superman font and drop shadow as it did in the DC Comics. Now fast forward a bit to 2009, and all speculations were laid to rest when the same site, Lost Levels, were able to locate an early build of this game in its early Superman form with the same level designs and even the Superman theme playing in the background. The only difference is that Superman was used as a sprite, and it is available to download if anyone is interested. Now, for those of you that are willing to play the Sunman ROM, you'll be met with a very difficult game. Now, the difficulty is probably due to the game's length, as this is a pretty short game. For experienced players, the game could probably be finished in less than 30 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, or maybe even less. And yes, the game can be beat. It is a pretty much complete game with the exception of a few bugs here and there. Now, some of Sunman's powers are the same as Superman's. That includes flight, super strength, and even laser vision. A few things I thought were pretty cool about this game was the inclusion of certain scenes that would prompt the player to mash buttons in order to stop a train or spin around fast enough to dig a hole in the floor. That isn't something that was seen in the 8-bit era very much. Now I also love how this game had a variety of levels in it. You have your regular side-scrolling beat-em-up levels, then they threw a shooter-style level, and even a flight sequence towards the end where you have to maneuver through a cave to reach the final boss. Now at the end of the game, after you beat the final boss, you watch Sunman fly past the Statue of Liberty. There's a scene of all the planets from orbit, and then a message that states, "Thank you for playing, watch for the next Sunsoft game." A fun fact is that this game was planned and directed by Kenji Eno, who later founded Warp, who released the game D for the 3DO, Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and other platforms, and later released D2 for the Dreamcast. And also the site owner of Lost Levels, Frank Cifaldi, eventually took his dedication to lost video games and started a video game history foundation in an attempt to build the country's first dedicated library for the study of video game history, as stated on his site, as well as source code preservation, which is extremely important nowadays as certain prototype builds are being discovered. So if you're interested, just head over to his site at gamehistory.org. And honestly, that's really all we know. No questions were ever answered about Sunman and why this nearly complete game never got released, and who chose Sunman as the protagonist. Now as for Sunsoft nowadays, well, they mainly focus on porting Mojang to mobile devices as well as the PC. And they're also responsible for localizing a few titles for the PS4 such as Abduction and House Flipper, a shadow of their former self. But that's not to say that Sunsoft doesn't deserve its praise for what it brought to the 8-bit era. And that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching, and if you like this video, consider supporting us on Patreon or follow us on social media. And we recently started streaming on Twitch, so give us a follow over there. I'll have a link in the description below. And consider joining our Discord where you'll be up to date on when we stream, or if you just want to talk about some unreleased games. And I'll catch you all next time.